Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local. Hello, Libration Nation. This week we are discussing Hannah Coulter, which is Wendell Berry's 7th novel and his first to employ the voice of a woman character in its telling. Hannah, who is now the elderly narrator, recounts the love she has had for the land and for her community. She remembers each of her 2 husbands and all the places and community connectors threatened by 20th century technologies. I loved having this conversation with Lacey Keigley. She is a mother, writer, educator, and the author of her memoir, Nevertheless, essays on divorce, single parenting, and hope, in which Lacey bends her trademark wit and style to the uncommon commonalities of daily life in her new normal, flinging back the curtains and inviting readers to witness the chaos, blessings, burdens, and hilarity of the world. At the heart of each lyrical essay is the one question: when life doesn't turn out as planned, what then? You can find her on social media at SoEveryday and also on Substack at SoEveryday. We sipped on a sweet tea during this episode as a tribute to Wendell Berry, his Southern roots, and of course our own. Also, I wanted to share with you another show I thought you might enjoy. Every book has 2 stories, one it tells and one it hides. If you're enjoying Drinks in the Library, we think you might like The Secret Life of Books, a weekly podcast by Sophie G and Jonty Claypole that uncovers the hidden stories behind classic books. Who made it? What were their motives, their scandals? And above all, what secrets lie behind the iconic books you thought you knew? And if you need some reading motivation, they have a book club for Secret Life of Books members that offers exclusive bonus episodes, reading notes, and helpful yet hilarious comments as they read through chapter by chapter. Their next book club read is Charles Dickens Bleak House. So go check out The Secret Life of Books. The first episode in their book club is out now, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. One last thing, Drinks in the Library is on Patreon. Please follow over there for ad-free episodes as well as special bonus content. Also, like and subscribe to Drinks in the Library wherever you get your podcasts. Review the show, leave 5 stars. All of those things help me grow, and I really appreciate it. All right, let's get to it. Greenville, did you get the crazy snow that they got in Charlotte?
Yes, a very bizarre. Yeah, I mean, for us, a lot of snow because we
Yeah.
didn't ever get any, which was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it. But yes, we definitely did have 2 weekends in a row, actually, of kind of real true winter weather.
Yeah. I interviewed someone right after that who was in Fort Mill, South Carolina,
Mhm.
and he was telling me it was like so funny to see. And I say this with all the love of being a fellow Southerner, like what the Southerners were putting out for their sleds.
Oh, yes. We just sled on anything.
Snow is here. Let us out. So
Yes, that's
yeah,
exactly
that
right.
that looked like a lot of fun. I saw it with my family in Charlotte, and so happy for y'all. So
Yes,
happy.
we were happy too.
Uh, and I'm excited to talk to you about this book, Hannah Coulter by Wendell Berry,
Yeah.
because, as a Southerner as well, I could feel a lot of the love, why people love this story. So I wanted to ask you, who were you when you first picked this book up?
Such a great question. And I've thought, it's funny because I'm a huge reader. I love to read, but I don't always read books twice. It is a pretty unique book for me to go back. I have a handful, a small list of books I'll reread and reread. And Hannah Coulter is one of them. And what I think is so interesting about that question and about how books changes is I do feel like I was a different person when I first picked it up. I was Oh man, it's probably 15 or more years ago. I was still married. I had young children who were like, going to need me first thing in the morning. And also kind of in that emotional sort of, I can't remember how old my youngest was, but still pretty young. And I remember making a choice that I was pretty close to the end of the book. And I was like, oh, I'm going to keep reading this. And I remember it was around 3 o'clock in the morning when I finished. I knew it was going to really alter my whole next day, but I couldn't stop reading. And I was just weeping and so moved by the story. And I was just like, oh, this book, it felt like it was going to change me. And I think it has. And then I've reread it many times since then. And I feel like I've become a different person in all those years. But that's where I was the first time I read it.
Okay. Do you connect with Hannah at different parts of her story in different ways?
Yes, for sure. And I think it's really interesting because it's a story of, kind of one of those sweeping stories where she starts out quite young in the story. I can't remember for sure, but she's, 12 or something, and it
Yeah.
covers her entire life all the way toward the end of her life, her whole experience. And so yeah, feeling connected to her at different times and connected with the different people, but different, almost even different parts of Hannah at different times. The time I first read it, I definitely felt very connected to the motherhood aspect of it because I was in those years where your days are dictated by sleep schedules and diapers and whatever they are.
Yeah.
And I'm not there anymore. And I actually read it again recently as my kids are now sort of leaving home and finding their own way and then connected to that part of her life where her kids are choosing to stay on the farm or not stay on the farm and so a whole different connection, a whole different
Right.
part of my life to be like, oh, right, and my book is so I have little marks all over it and written in it in dog tag the ears and all kind. I mean,
Aw.
corners. It's very beloved.
Oh, I love that. So, for the listeners who haven't read Hannah Coulter, tell us, guide us through who is Hannah, I guess.
Yeah. And it's so tricky because I don't want to give any spoilers, although I don't think I will. But what's neat is so Wendell Berry writes often. A lot of his books are set in the same area. So Hannah might show up in some of his other novels, but not as much. This is her book. And Hannah it's they're all set in Kentucky in a fiction town of Port William, but also, well, any Kentucky town really, and probably Wendell Berry's Kentucky town. And so it's set in that area, and it kind of she's her right at the beginning, so this isn't any spoilers. Her mother passes away when she's young, and she's really raised by a grandmother and her father, but a grandmother who's really her influence. And her grandmother sees that life is changing for her. Her dad gets remarried. She sees this future coming for her that's not going to necessarily be good. So she kind of intercedes for Hannah. And so she finds a place for Hannah to live, and Hannah interacts with these other families and kind of comes into her own. There's a war happening, and it goes through her marriage through I don't want to give away some of those things, but through her growth as a human. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, all the way from like 12 till the end of her life. But then all these other people that come in and intersect her life to like the whole town. What's fun
Right.
about Wendell Berry is you'll meet a character like Jaber Crow, who's a barber, and then he'll have his own book later too. So you get kind of really connected to these different people. And Wendell Berry's a guy, and he wrote this book all in first person from a woman's point of view, which I think is unique and special in its own way too. And so, yeah, so Hannah's really easy to connect with, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. She's really easy to see things from her point of view and kind of simple, at first. And then I mean, simple as far as say education goes,
Hmm.
but then her growth is pretty phenomenal, I think.
Yeah. And I think this for the listener, so I think you might have touched on this, but it starts off in like 1930. And
Mhm.
so this is true rural America, it feels
Yes.
like for sure. Are there aspects? All right, what do you what do you connect with rural America? I think is an interesting question.
I think that's actually probably what first drew me in. So I grew up in rural America in Virginia,
Right.
and I was raised on a dairy farm and very
Aw.
much a sense of place, right? And I think that's something Wendell Berry masters is this idea of a sense of place. And I think Hannah's really connected to it. It becomes, at first, it's not hers. And then as she lives and raises children and loves and hurts and grows, she really is connected to the actual physical place. And I feel very connected to my family's farm in Virginia. And so that was another aspect I really connected with is the idea of knowing a land. And I'm pretty sure it's in this book, but it could be a different Wendell Berry writing. But he talks about like the knowing a place takes a long time, maybe it takes a lifetime, knowing a house or how a house changes when you know it or how a property changes when you know it. And I feel really connected to that idea because of my family's farm in Virginia that feels like home, even though I haven't lived there in a very long time. And so that element of Hannah's life really connected with me of this. And I think I grew up, I would probably be the kid who left the farm. Like some of Hannah's kids had to decide because I grew up in this farming community and I really wanted to get out. Like
Yeah.
all I wanted to do was get out for a while. And then it wasn't until I reached, my 30s or even later, I was like, oh, that was a really good thing. Now I kind of want to go back, but I couldn't in the same way. You never can. And I think that's a piece I really connected with Hannah's children and with even their community of you give this next generation these gifts, these privileges of education, these privileges of maybe easier living,
Yeah.
and yet we all pay a price for it somehow. And I think that's really interesting to think about in a grand picture too.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about how did it feel growing up on the dairy farm, and maybe I'm maybe speaking a little bit to like personal experiences that I have of maybe not quite feeling like you fit there. Does that sound like
Yeah, that's
you?
interesting, which I would love to hear how you grew up too, because well, I had three brothers
Hmm.
and I was the only girl and my mom. So in some ways that always was its own unique thing, but sometimes I felt like the opposite. I felt really lucky that I had my mom to myself. I never really even thought about wanting sisters until I was an adult and I was seeing like how hard it was to keep in touch with my brothers. They'd marry and go off to these different places. When my mom was sick and passed away, and I thought, oh, it would be so comforting to have a sister. And so I didn't want that as a kid. I really liked what I had. But then in later life, I'm like, oh, a sister would be a comforting thing. So I don't think I felt, even though I wanted to get out, it was more like to not to my credit. It was more of a thinking that I had bigger and better things on the
Hmm.
horizon, more thinking that I deserved something really grand and thinking that what I had wasn't really grand, that it was, a working life and that didn't seem as exciting. And it was not definitely until I was much older to realize that there was so much value in that. And I have a deep
Yeah.
affection now, but I did totally change. I didn't go back to the farm. I didn't go back and live there. My kids don't live on a farm.
I just was curious about that. It actually isn't me that has the connection. I'm from Charlotte. I was born in Atlanta. So I don't know if I want to say
Totally understand.
a person I'm very close with is from a rural area and said from the time they were 5 years old, they never felt like they fit in. And so it's always just interesting. And not that they don't love it there in some ways. It never really was the right fit for them. So
Yeah.
I'm always curious about do other people have those kinds of experiences and what it feels like. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting in our childhood because it's not until we're looking back that we think like, but I mean, I didn't have that feeling, but I know people that experience that too of, oh, my whole life I felt I was in the wrong place.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the characters in the story a little bit. We know Hannah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, she has. I mean, I think what's interesting, there's so many interesting characters, but one of the characters that becomes really important is Nathan. And I think he's kind of a man of a few words, but when he does speak, it's really important. He only speaks when it's something valuable. But I think what's neat about his relationship with Hannah is that he really sees her. He really understands her and really loves her. Just, and I think I don't know, there's something to some of these older stories where, like you said, it's in the 1930s and tracing their lives. In some ways, there's a lot less competition for attention. You
Hmm.
don't have the internet, you don't have access to, I mean, sometimes even a telephone. You don't have access to so much.
I know.
Yeah, so you're able to be really present with the thing in front of you because the thing in front of you is everything.
Right.
And we don't have that anymore. We'll never get that again.
I know. Would you go back if you could?
That's such a good question because I mean, part of me is like, yeah, bring me to Little House on the Prairie, let me live. But I also, I mean, we all have what we get used to, but I love that the people who are far away from me, I can be connected to them.
Right.
That's really nice. We couldn't do things like this. But
Yeah.
but if we didn't know they existed, maybe that would be okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I feel like I grew up that like last little bit. I remember when we didn't have the internet, right? And I remember when we got the internet.
Right.
And it happened so quickly and I don't think there was any realization of like how many things were going to change and we were never going to go back to having a rotary phone and all.
Right. Right.
Are there any other characters that you're really drawn to?
Well, I think that it's really sweet. She has some. in-laws, like, well, kind of two sets of in-laws. I do feel like it's a spoiler somehow. I'm like trying to
Okay.
protect it, but it's so hard because whatever. And
Yeah.
I think it's really precious the way her first set of in-laws love her and care for her and keep caring for her
Mm,
and really take her in as a daughter despite all the things that happen.
yeah.
And so I think they're really special characters. I feel like they really, again, I think what's really interesting and probably a theme I obviously have come back to a couple times is how well I feel like in many ways Hannah is and feels known by the people around her, and I think that's a
Yeah.
gift
Yeah.
that I think we can still have. I think I might be tempted to think it's easier then, but maybe not. But
Yeah.
I think there's a thing that we all want, is to feel like we are known and seen and understood. And I think that's pretty important. And I don't think in this story Hannah was by her father, just he just was unable to.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a huge part of the story, but I think it's a piece of it. And so these other people who love her and know her, I think really bring out something new in her, which is special.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to, she kind of, and I think that's maybe an aspect of growing up, not in a hard situation, because I don't think she was really, I mean, she wasn't abused by her father, maybe a little neglected, but she still had her grandmother. But it was like there wasn't a lot of introspection on her part of, at least in how she told the story, of any pain she felt from the loss of her mother. And so you have to imagine that when she found those other people that really saw her, that felt amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, especially in like here's her real people, here's her real roots. Because she didn't like she moved towns and so but then by the end of the story, the place is hers, the home place is hers, the story is hers. And so she really did kind of put those roots down in a new place. I
Yeah.
mean, though she hadn't lived that far away, she lived far enough away that this was all new to her. So yeah, I think there's something about that too of building your own, which we all do, right? We get married and whether we live near where we grew up or near where our spouse grows up, or we build our own kind of community that just, becomes our people, our place. And I think
Right.
that's what she did that created that for herself and the people around her.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to guess that you really enjoy other Wendell Berry stories and you really,
I do for sure.
yeah. What do we know about Mr. Berry?
He's still living. He's quite elderly and he like little quirky things. He writes all of his stories. I can't remember if he writes them by hand or a typewriter. I feel like it was by hand and his wife types them, or he says them out loud and his wife types them, but they have some sort of really precious sort of connection where he's, either typing them or she's typing them and they work together. And I do believe he has one more novel coming out, or maybe it just recently came out. I should have looked that up.
Oh,
Which
good
is,
for him.
yeah, we actually all, I mean, I think anyone who loves Wendell Berry sort of thought it was over.
Uh-huh.
And so it was like, yay, one more thing. And he's
Oh.
written, this whole little town of Port William, but then he has a lot of nonfiction
Mhm.
about, like, honestly, about farming and agrarian. I can't even say that word correctly. It's like rural, both hard words,
Yeah.
but about that lifestyle.
Uh-huh.
And so he writes about that too, and a lot of beautiful poetry, which I think if you love poetry at all, he's a really accessible poet.
Hmm.
So if you're a person who at all loves poetry, I think he's a good way to, like, a good gateway.
Yeah.
And then a lot of essays. He writes a lot of essays.
Hmm. Yeah.
He's very, very likable and very private.
Okay, it's funny you brought this because I actually hadn't read any Wendell Berry before this, and I one of my very early episodes with a pretty famous librarian here in Virginia, Nan Carmack. She was just in that episode, she's talking about Wendell Berry and how amazing Wendell Berry is. And so when you emailed me and you mentioned Wendell Berry, I was like, heck yeah, I've been meaning to get to
Yay.
him.
Yeah, I heard that one. I loved it. She was from Virginia and loved Wendell Berry. That was a fun.
Oh, good. You listened to that
Yeah.
one? Oh,
Yes.
good. Yes. She's amazing. Yeah. And like I said, a little famous.
Yeah, a little famous. I listened to that one. I listened to many of these, but I also love what I think about so fun about this podcast and about reading in general is we can talk about Wendell Berry and Hannah Coulter, which is its own kind of literature. But then I loved the one you had recently about the Flat Share, which is a book I loved
Yeah.
and was so entertaining because it was just such a fun story and like a fun little like maybe a familiar idea, maybe, but taken to a different extreme, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think someone said recently that it's sort of like a real book club where sometimes it's very serious and sometimes it's just who knows what we're gonna say.
Yes, which is great. That's how I mean, I teach an English class, a writing
Uh-huh.
class. And I love telling kids, that's the fun of writing. You find connections, you find where you belong or where you don't. You
Mhm.
laugh, you cry, whatever it is, but there's all these connections and you just don't know where they're going to take you and it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. That's what life is, right? we're just all along for the ride.
Definitely. For sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I know you said you had a lot of notes, and if there's anything you wanted to make sure we got to about Hannah Coulter.
That's a great question. So one of the things I thought was really interesting. So I guess my pages are so turned down. I thought this was so a couple years ago. It's been quite a few years actually. He was speaking at a I don't know, an event of something in Kentucky. So a couple of my friends, we love him and we're like, let's go. So we got in our
Yes.
car and drove, I don't know, 7 hours or something to this event. And he was just precious because he is an older guy and he read some stories and then he spoke about his writing process. And then he had a very, very teeny window of question and answers. And it was so interesting. And I don't know, it's funny. So one girl, we couldn't think of anything to ask. We're like, what are we going to ask Wendell Berry? I don't know. And so a lady stood up and she said, Hannah Coulter is this book and the main character is a woman. And how can you as a man write about this woman so well? How can you know her so well? And he, kind of paused and he said, yeah, I get asked that a lot. And he said, he said, one, I kind of was in love with Hannah. I was writing the story. I sort of was in love with her too. I just kind of, and he said, I would write her. I would stop for the day and I would think about Hannah. What would she say? And I tried to really embody her. And then at the end of the day, I would take my writings from the day. I'd read them to my wife and I'd say, does this sound like Hannah? And she would say, yes, that sounds like Hannah. Or I don't know if that sounds like Hannah today. And so then I would listen to my wife's advice and we would go through that. And so I thought that was a lovely way to connect with his wife and to connect with the
Yeah.
character and to really. And then this lady who had asked the question said, I don't know, it was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, I think you missed the point because she said, I knew it. I knew a woman wrote that. And I was like,
Oh.
a woman didn't write it. He said he trusted his wife's intuition, but that he loved Hannah and so I was like, no, I think you missed that. And he just looked a little disappointed. And I was like, oh, I just want to hug him. But it was just so interesting because I think I don't know, we hear what we want to hear sometimes.
Right.
But anyway, that's a little sidetrack about Wendell. But it was just a real delight to get to know that we got to at least hear him speak once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I agree with you on that. We can I feel like women can write women or women can write men and men can write women. I think being thoughtful about it is the really important key. So, anyway.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, we're all writing fiction is made up, right? So
Right.
we have that freedom to write it as we want. Then no one has to read it if they don't want to.
Yeah. If you were recommending the ideal reader for Hannah Coulter, who would you say this story's for?
I do feel like it appeals to women more, which is funny, I think, in a way, but I do think it does. So I often have students who are like, should I read Hannah Coulter yet? And I sometimes am like, I kind of want them to live a little before they meet Hannah. It's not that you can't love her in your 20s, and maybe you can, but I feel like you either need to have lived a pretty unique life early on, or you need to know a little more about some of the hardships of life you might still get something out of the book, but I feel like a person who's lived, a person who's been
Yeah.
sad, a person who has known really kind of the highs and lows of loss and of love. I feel like they're going to love Hannah more. They're going to connect more. And I feel like if you just haven't experienced that yet, and I don't know if it's a book that you will love as much. I feel like you've had to have lived through some things, which could be men or women for sure. But I do think there's a bit more of an appeal to a female audience. But I don't know. I guess I haven't talked to too many men about whether they've read Hannah Coulter or not, to be honest.
We'll get some men to
Let's do
read
a
it. We'll
survey.
come back.
Yes, find out. Do guys like it? I don't know, actually.
So, speaking of, experiences in life, I wanted to take some time to talk about you, to talk about your projects and put a spotlight on
Thank
your
you.
work.
Yeah, so I'm actually a writer as well, but most of my career has been writing essays, nonfiction, journalism. I've worked at newspapers and freelance magazines and websites, and that's primarily what I do now is website writing, essay writing, Substack, which I think is a great new world for us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, do you read much Substack? Do you do?
I'm on there sometimes. I can, well, if I'm really honest, it is hard for me to keep up with anything.
Oh my word, because
But
there's always something new.
you know what? If someone wants to pay me to be independent and I can be independently wealthy, then I'm going to be on everything.
Right. Me too. Same. Yeah. When they want to do that. But in
Yeah.
the meantime, what I like about Substack is it just gets people, you can do the same. To me, it's like, it was almost like a rebirth of the blog back
Right.
in the day when blogs were king and everyone was reading them and now they're not. Well, now it's the blog that just comes into your inbox.
Uh-huh.
I really appreciate that Substack brings you right to your readers
Right.
because we are opening our email. So I do Substack, which I really love, and that's my own personal just things I want to write about. And then I have a book that I've written and published last year that was a slow build in writing. It's a memoir, and it's called Nevertheless, and it's essays on divorce, single parenting, and hope. And I hope it's more about the hope part because my personal backdrop is single parenting, divorce. But the book itself is more, I mean, it is my story for sure. But also I think it's like any other thing you read, it's I think relatable in terms of if you've had a life that you thought was going to go one way and then it went a different way.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's I hope what the book is more about. So you wouldn't have had to experience the same things, just like you don't have to experience what Hannah did to relate to her, or any other book. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Wendell Berry. That would be a bold comparison. But yeah, so I've published that. And hopefully we'll be working on some others. I mean, I've got little ones in the works, but I, like have side hustles and my full-time job is different. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What I'm just kind of curious if you have advice for people because I think none of us plan for that change in life to
Mhm.
happen so quickly. And I think that nevertheless is on the other side of what you've seen. What would be your advice to someone going through that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm 11 years out now. And so I've had a whole other life since then, which I'm grateful for, incredibly grateful for. I think one of the things I always tell people is like, I don't know, I like to tell them pretty quickly, you're going to survive, you're going to make it. Because I really think when you are at that ground zero, it feels like there will never be another day. There will never be a good thing. It's hard,
Yeah.
and whether it's divorce or loss of someone you love, or it can even be a job loss because we get, it's a part of our identity. A
Right.
hundred things that we can, giant moves that change
Right.
our family's dynamics or whatever they can be. We feel like it's the end, and I don't know. I think for a handful of reasons, my mom's death, some other life circumstances, I have a pretty quick to think I don't want to waste a lot of time. Life is short. I really feel like I have a really clear sense that I don't have a lot of time to waste. People don't have a lot of time to waste. So I certainly don't want to have a little bow on it and pretend to be something I'm not or to feel something I don't. But I just don't want to spend an awful lot of time looking back or being in a pit, you know? And I think for me, a huge, huge gift which I hope people have is friends, people. You feel like you're really alone. But something that good writing does, and something that I think community does, is as soon as you start talking about it, whether you choose to use social media to do that, whether you choose to use a book club setting or friends, as soon as you start talking about it, other people are like, oh, me too, me
I
too.
know.
Yeah. And we're really not alone, but we tell
No.
ourselves we are.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually going through not a terribly sad thing, but something I felt a little alone with, and I was with some girlfriends last night and I brought it up and they were just like, I'm having that too. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, thank God it's not just me.
Yeah, it's not, and it almost never is just us, right? I
Right.
think something that's been interesting lately, I feel like in this sort of social media world, we've finally, especially as a person who's 52, I feel like we're finally talking about menopause even, which
Uh-huh.
was happening for people forever, right? But
Right.
we didn't talk about it. And now everyone's talking about it. But we're also being like, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the advice I would kind of give to people is go ahead and talk about it. Whether you want to do that in therapy, you should. That's really
Yeah.
good. But if you also just have human beings, I mean, shoot, try it with the person in line at the grocery store if you have to. Just begin to say things out loud because as soon as you say them out loud, they really do lose some of that power. Like, or
Mhm.
even when you say them out loud, they sound a little bit, you're like, oh, that's probably not true. I'm going to be alone forever. That sounds pretty big when you say that. Maybe that's not true, or whatever the
Yeah.
thing is that you're holding on to, and it feels huge to you
Yeah.
until you verbalize it and you're like, oh, okay, it's not quite like that.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that so much. I think that's great advice. Thank you. So I am excited. Before we get off the call, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, so the book itself, nevertheless, you can find it anywhere, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon. Substack, you can find me at Lacey Keigley Substack. And I do Instagram, Facebook. My Back when I had a blog, my name was So Everyday because I had all these little kids and I called it like, oh, life is just so full of everyday things, right? And so then that became my handle on Instagram and a website and things was also Everyday. So that's still all out there floating around. But you also can just find Lacey Keigley and on Amazon for the book and stuff. So yeah.
Yay. Okay, so fun. This was amazing to talk about Wendell Berry. Also, we did not bring it up. Our drink was a sweet tea.
Yes.
I downed my
And your glass is so cute too.
yeah, I think I joke I had this is the millennial glass. You know like our grandparents, our parents had that Corningware pottery where it's the
Yes.
white with the blue flower on it.
Yes.
I all of our children are going to be inheriting these glasses.
That's exactly right. That's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. So, well, this was absolutely lovely, Lacey. Thank you so much. I love talking with you tonight and also enjoying this wonderful book.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was very fun to
Yay.
do this.
Yay. All right.
I'm gonna take
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guests for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.